To my channel, Enjoy Watercolour Painting. I'm Diana, I'm a watercolourist. I paint and give watercolour classes here in my gallery in southwest France. And the subject of today's video is loose watercolour. This is in response to a question by one of my subscribers, Penny, who asked, what do you mean by loose atmospheric landscape? Well, I had to think about that one and how I could best illustrate this method of watercolour painting in a video. And this is what we're going to do today. I'm going to start right from the beginning with my approach to loose watercolour painting and how I can use it to create a landscape. This time, a gentle walk through a woodland here in Haute-Vienne, where I live. So follow me in the next few moments. I'll explain every step of the way. We'll paint it together. So let's paint. Now the picture I'm going to start today is quite a big project, as you see. I have the paper stretched onto a large board and I'm going to start it by loosely painting. I'm not doing any pencil work at all. This is my interpretation of how to paint loosely in watercolour. The inspiration for this painting is a simple photograph, just a small photograph that I took quite a few years ago of a walk through one of the woods here in Haute-Vienne, of which there are many. I just like the way the sun is coming through the trees, the dappled sunlight on the path, and the lighter colours, which it's kind of backlit. And so this does lend itself to painting loose in watercolour for a start. All the detail we'll do later. So the colours that I'm going to use for the loose washes that I'm going to start with are this delicate shade of yellow and greeny yellow, a hint of burnt sienna. The sky isn't blue, it's just a very gentle grey. So the colours are very gentle and they're all combined. And really, I'm not worrying too much about the position of any detail or objects. Now I have my palettes prepared. A green palette, bottom of the frame here with transparent yellow and Winsor blue green shade. Yellow palette, transparent yellow again and some new gamboge yellow. And then a burnt sienna Payne's grey palette with yellow here, but I'm not going to use the yellow in this instance. I'm going to start with a very large mop brush, the largest mop brush I have, which is 14. And I'm going to more or less wet the whole area of this Fabriano Artistico rough grain paper. I'm going to leave certain parts dry, including the spot for the sun here coming through the trees, and some of the areas here, but it will be very random. It's not really planned. I just want to kind of create blocks of colour which merge together, which will give me an idea of how the picture is going to evolve. Now I'm going to begin by wetting the paper. First of all, the top of the paper for the sky. I'm applying the water with a large mop brush and fairly generously so it's shiny wet. In the mid-ground, I'm using a horizontal brush stroke because I want to leave some flashes of light because of the light coming through the trees and the dappled shade on the path. So having already prepared the grey, I'm spotting it in followed by the yellow and the green mix, and moving it with the board there, so you can see there are areas that are not wet, which is fine because, as I've explained, we have the dappled sunlight. This is just the initial covering of paint, just to define the different areas of the image. And further down in the foreground we do have flashes of burnt sienna, so the burnt sienna is going on in the same way, all horizontally. I'm not worrying at all about an even covering because this is just to define the different areas instead of using pencil lines. The painting is still wet, but now I'm taking the opportunity with a small liner brush to add some of the greens in the midground where the focal point or the destination at the end of the path would be. This light green is behind the darker trees. So we're working really essentially from back to front, starting with the lighter colours that are behind this photograph, which is backlit. So this liner brush delivers the paint really quite delicately, and that works fine. Now I've added more colour on the right hand side because there's the grassy bank beside the path which is darker, and the same thing on the left too, using a medium-sized mop brush and getting braver because I spotted some colour in. This is really a good way of marking out the different blocks of colour and gives you reference points for all the detail that we're going to add later. But I find this works for me much better than having pencil work, because then you tend to paint within the lines and the picture becomes too structured too early on. Now I'm going to let the whole thing dry, and here it is now dry, and I'm going to concentrate on the focal point, the destination, the light at the end of the path. You can just see it in the photograph on the left hand side, and there's the silhouette of several small trees there, which I'm using a very fine zero liner to give me an indication of the detail. Your focal point in a picture, or the destination, should always have more detail and contrast, and to have a focal point is an important feature of composition. So I'm just adding darker greens and a little hint of brown in some areas, just to define those trees in the distance. On the left hand side the trees are a little darker, and so I'm using more of a darker green mix with some burnt sienna as well. You'll notice the destination is offset more to the right than the left, because a diagonal travel, a diagonal journey in a landscape picture is much better than a vertical one. I can add the colour and then just move it with water to give a basis for the trees, as you see I'm doing there. Just move the paint across a little because there are shadows all the way across this path. I guess you can see them in the photograph there. And now I'm concentrating on the area to the right of the focal point, where we have a mix of trees, hard to see in the photograph, but I'm just going to define them a little with a mix of green with more Payne's grey added. And I've wet the paper first vertically so that the colour will run along the wet lines. So look, it's a bit difficult to see the tops of the trees here, but I cropped the image so you could see the detail more closely. But it is there, and you will see it in a little while. And the grassy bank then slopes down to the path. So I'm adding colour at the base of the trees just to suggest that. And now I can start to redefine the bank there below the trees with some more burnt sienna and moving it with the brush. This is a medium-sized mop brush, just to get the feel for the way the land lies. And shading across the path, which is important, I can just start to hint at by adding some colour and then washing it in with clean water on the larger mop brush. So this is a very subtle, loose painting at this stage, but I can tell where different features are, and I'm getting a feeling for the way the land is sloping either side of the path. Taking more colour right down to the foreground. Now I'm concentrating on the path with more burnt sienna, just washing it across in a horizontal way, adding colour where needed. This has all got to be consolidated later and more detail added if required. But the aim is to produce a very soft, very loose landscape, which I have the choice then to either leave the painting as is or go in and add more detail. Now the mix is becoming more towards black with more Payne's grey added, but I'm always leaving this patch of sunlight which you see in the photograph because I want that to be important in the finished painting. I'm thinking about the trees on the left now, and I've got my natural hair fan brush. Great fun, this brush. You can dance it along the paper there. You don't want straight dots, so you want them to be a bit higgledy-piggledy, so you can dot it about and add, whilst the paint is still wet, add more colour with a liner, just so that it runs into all the little dots and gives a denser area in some places. But it's a nice brush to use, and it gives the feathery appearance of the pine trees, which are here on the left hand side of the image. Just using the photograph as a reference so that we get the trees more or less in the right place. Doesn't have to be totally accurate, but near enough helps. More colour and shading going in now to consolidate the trees and make them look more realistic. Always do the leaves first and the trunk and the branches later, as you will see in a moment. I like the contrast of greens. It's working out okay. Now the leaves are dry, and with my medium liner I can start to suggest the trunk of the trees. Go in thinner first. You can always widen the trunk with clean water running alongside the paint whilst it's still wet. But once you've done a big thick tree trunk, it's more difficult to remove or alter. And it's now you see the trunk, now you don't, as it climbs up through the branches. I'm using a mix of Payne's Grey and Burnt Sienna for the darkness of the tree trunks. And always we give the trees a base by just with clean water washing the colour between the trees at their base. Standing up to do this. Hope I'm not getting in the way too much. But you can see this area on the left is much darker, and there's another bank which again slopes down. So we're applying the water and the paint in that way diagonally down the bank. And the colours that I applied at the beginning stay there, so give that lovely transparency which we associate with watercolour. I've spotted some more colour in now, and we can let it run down the bank, which is working fine. Taking water to meet the paint, just so we have a softer edge. Now we're thinking about the foreground on the left hand side, and whilst the paint is wet I've spotted some clean water with a liner brush into the greens of the bank, just to give me those blooms which will help when we come to do the foreground detail. And I'm adding again with the same brush a mix of burnt sienna and just a hint of Payne's Grey, because this will be the bracken and the tree and the other plants which are right at the side of the path in the foreground. And some darker greens going in. They will mix and move together and change, but this will be a good basis for the foreground detail. There will still be more work to do on the path, but now I've used this loose painting technique to create the image. I know exactly where everything is without any pencil work at all, just loose washes and letting the water move the paint around to give us a very natural basis for our walk through the woodland. Well, my walk through the woodland is dry now. It's all ready to go in there to add more detail. Painting less wet on wet and more darker shading, darker detail, definition of the path here and the foreground, and maybe some more darker areas here to give the contrast of the light coming through the trees. There's quite a lot of work to do yet, but I hope it's given you an idea and the inspiration to try painting loosely with watercolour to give you a good basis to start your painting. Stay with me in the next video because we'll return to this image to do the detail, to create more contrast and more definition in some areas. And we'll decide when to stop, because knowing when to stop is always a tricky decision to make. Some of you may think that this could be the end result, as certainly it could, but I do want to add more contrast, and it will be the subject of my next video. If you haven't done so already, please don't forget to like and subscribe, ring the bell so that you get informed when the next video has arrived, and leave any comments you may have, because I love to get your comments. And thank you, Penny, for your suggestion. Till the next time, happy painting. Bye.